In every corner of the known galaxy, that name carried the weight of centuries. It was whispered in the Senate halls of the Lorenian Collective. It was carved as a warning above the gate of the Pellucid Archive. It was the single word that could silence an entire spaceport, spoken the way old sailors once spoke of storms too large to outrun. The Vrethkai had conquered 47 civilizations, not defeated them, not absorbed them, conquered them in the old, cruel sense of the word. They toppled governments, stripped planets of resources, and left behind hollow moons and broken peoples. Their fleet was vast, their weapons were precise, and their patience was legendary. They were known to study a target species for decades before striking. They mapped weakness with the same care that others mapped stars. And so when their great scanning arrays turned toward the third planet of an unremarkable yellow star in the galactic rim, the Vrethkai were not concerned. They catalogued what they found with mild interest. A young species, barely spacefaring, prone to conflict among themselves, divided into hundreds of political factions, biologically fragile, soft-skinned, temperature-sensitive, with a lifespan barely exceeding 1 century. The High Tribunal of the Vrethkai studied the data for 6 of their standard years. They watched human broadcasts, intercepted communications, and observed military drills from a comfortable distance. What they saw confirmed everything their analysts predicted. Humans were chaotic, emotional, irrational, and so the Vrethkai did what they had done 47 times before. They sent a single transmission, encoded in the basic galactic trade language. You will surrender your world within 1 planetary rotation. Resistance will be instructive for our archives. The transmission reached Earth's newly established galactic communications hub at 4:17 Greenwich Mean Time on a Tuesday. By 4:23, it had been decoded. By 4:31, it had reached every world leader, military commander, and scientific advisor on the planet simultaneously. Admiral Yawanda Osebansu of the Earth Unified Defense Directorate read it 3 times. Then she set down her coffee, deliberately, carefully, and said to her communications officer, "Get me everyone. I mean everyone." The Vrethkai expected panic. Their behavioral models had projected a 94.7% probability of immediate governmental collapse, followed by factional fighting and eventual submission. It had happened that way with the Pellucids. It had happened that way with the Garathian clans. Young species, when faced with existential obliteration from an unknown enemy, tended to turn on each other before they turned outward. What happened instead confused the Vrethkai analysts for a very long time afterward. Within 6 hours of the transmission, the competing superpowers of Earth had opened direct communication channels for the first time in 11 years. Within 12 hours, military forces that had been pointed at each other across disputed borders were repositioning. Not retreating, but rotating, facing outward toward space. Within 18 hours, Earth's 17 regional defense networks had merged into a single unified command structure. The Vrethkai observer drones, watching from the edge of the solar system, recorded the data and forwarded it to the High Tribunal. One of the junior analysts flagged it as anomalous. The senior council dismissed her concern. "Prey species consolidate when threatened," said High Commander Vrethsal. "It is instinct. It will not last. When the fleet arrives, the fractures will return." He had never been wrong before. He had also never studied humans before. The Vrethkai fleet entered the solar system on the morning of the 31st day. They had given humanity 1 rotation and then waited, curious, to observe the chaos of a civilization's final hours. What they found was not chaos. Earth's defense forces had not scattered. They had not begged. They had not broadcast a surrender signal, not even a preliminary one, which most species used to negotiate terms before the bombardment began. Instead, the Vrethkai fleet's long-range sensors picked up something that took their tactical computers nearly 4 minutes to classify. Mines, hundreds of thousands of them, spread across a debris field near Jupiter's trailing Trojan points, disguised as ordinary rock, powered down to near-zero emissions, laid with a precision that their engineers quietly admitted was impressive. And that was just the outer layer. What followed was unlike any engagement the Vrethkai had ever recorded. Because humans, it turned out, had been preparing for invasion for a very long time. Not from the Vrethkai specifically, from the deep, quiet fear that had lived in the human imagination since the first night some ancestor looked up at the stars and wondered, what if something looks back? Every science fiction novel, every defense think tank report, every late-night conversation in a university lab about the Fermi paradox, every arms designer who had lain awake worrying about asymmetric warfare. They had all, in their own way, contributed. But it wasn't the weapons that stopped the Vrethkai. It was Commander Priya Nair. She was 34 years old. She commanded a converted asteroid miner retrofitted into a long-range communications vessel. Her crew was 8 people. Her ship had no weapons, and she flew it directly toward the Vrethkai command formation. Not to attack, to talk. The Vrethkai fleet held fire, not out of mercy, but confusion. Their threat assessment protocols had no category for an unarmed vessel approaching at non-evasive speed with communications arrays broadcasting open. "This is Commander Priya Nair of the Earth Unified Defense Directorate," she said, her voice steady and clear across every channel. "I am not here to surrender. I am not here to threaten. I am here because before this goes any further, I want you to understand something about the people you are trying to conquer." She paused. "We have been at war with each other for most of our history. We have been cruel to each other in ways I am not proud of. We have made terrible mistakes. We are far from perfect." Another pause, shorter this time. "But we have never, in all our history, given up. Not once. Not ever. And I need you to know that before you make a decision that cannot be unmade." High Commander Vrethsal watched the transmission with the cold patience of someone who had heard many final speeches. He had heard the Pellucid High Priest recite the last prayers of his civilization. He had received the recorded apologies of the Garathian Queen. He had studied every kind of submission, every form of desperate plea. He had never heard anything like this, because Commander Nair was not pleading. She was not praying. She was informing him, as calmly and precisely as one might brief a colleague before a difficult meeting. And then she sent the data. It was everything. The full scope of Earth's defense preparations, not as a threat display, but as a transparent accounting. Every mine, every orbital platform, every retrofitted vessel and submarine-launched missile array and repurposed satellite. All of it shared openly. "We calculated your fleet's capabilities from the spectroscopic data on your engine exhaust," Nair continued. "We know what your weapons can do. We know what ours can do. I will not pretend we can win a direct engagement. We cannot. You would break through our defenses. You would reach Earth." Vrethsal leaned forward. "But I want you to understand the cost," she said. "Not to us, we've already accepted it. The cost to you. Your fleet will lose between 60 and 70% of its combat capability before it reaches orbit. The engagement will last months. Every one of those months our people, 8 billion of them, will continue to build, to adapt, to fight. And when this is over, even if you win, you will have spent everything you have on one small, stubborn, unremarkable planet." She let the silence sit for a long moment. "Or," she said, "you could talk to us. Because here is something else you should know about humans. We are very, very good at finding solutions when we need to." In the Vrethkai Command Center, no one spoke. The junior analyst who had flagged the anomaly 31 days ago looked at her senior commander. He did not look back at her. On their screens, the data Nair had sent was being processed. The numbers were accurate. Every projection, every calculation, precise. The humans had mapped their own destruction with perfect clarity, and still they had not flinched. Vrethsal stood. "Open a channel," he said quietly. No one recorded what was said in those first hours of negotiation. What was recorded in the official Vrethkai Historical Archive, later recovered and translated, was the entry filed by High Commander Vrethsal at the end of that day. It read, in the precise and formal language of his people, "The species designation human is to be reclassified, removed from the prey registry. They are not what our models predicted. They do not fight like a species trying to survive. They fight like a species that has already decided they will. There is a distinction. It is important. We were not prepared for it. The Vrethkai withdrew from the solar system 12 days later. They did not return, not as conquerors. Years later, when the dust of those 31 days had settled into history, Commander Prionaire was asked in an interview what she had been thinking when she flew that unarmed ship toward the most dangerous fleet in the known galaxy. She was quiet for a moment. "I was thinking about my grandmother," she said. "She survived things that would have broken most people. And I once asked her how. She said, because I never let them see the moment I was afraid. Not because I wasn't afraid, but because fear is private, and courage is what you show the world." She looked at the interviewer. I figured that applied to alien empires too. The galaxy, it turned out, had been watching that broadcast. In every corner of known space, across species that had never agreed on anything, the moment Commander Nair flew an unarmed ship into the heart of a conquering fleet and talked was discussed, analyzed, and quietly marveled at. Because in 47 conquered civilizations, not one had done that. Not one had thought to. And for the first time, the galaxy understood what it truly meant to be human. If the story moved you, subscribe for more human stories from the stars.